Let me introduce you to the NOM, the Normal Organisational Malaise. It's really important to understand it, how it operates, why it exists, and most importantly, how to resolve it when it's present. Because when you can see it, you can recognize it quickly, and then you know exactly what to do. Whereas now I think people are just frustrated and annoyed by it, don't quite understand what it is, and don't know how to address it really in a very sober and systematic way. So I was, studying systems, integrating knowledge about them as I do, pondering them, and I observed something interesting. There was, these scandals in the NHS, in the police force, scandals in charities, and what I noticed was that when the reviews were done or the investigations were done and so on, the patterns, the problematic patterns that led up to this were often the same pattern, you know. So it was interesting. So I said, let's give it a name, this kind of dysfunction and kind of decline in organizations, so they can operate poorly and pretty bad things can happen because of how they're operating. And I said, it doesn't seem to be separate, like the police force and the NHS and charities or government bodies. You would think they're separate, but actually it seems to be the same dynamic operating within all of them. And the same rules apply for how this dynamic works. And there's a lot of them. But there's a common set of how they operate that creates this organizational malaise. And I just call it the normal organizational malaise. And I began to evaluate, different patterns you can see in management and leadership in organizations that are fairly standard across this. And then, it's quite, obviously, a lack of feedback for what they're trying to achieve, so they'll have a meeting about something, and then they'll say, well, let's action that. Okay, we've actioned that. And then in the next meeting, we'll review, was that action completed? And they consider that success. But there's something missing from that. There's no feedback. Did that action address the concern? So that's an example of the normal organizational malaise. And if you see that, they're taking actions to address something, and the success is there because we made a decision, because obviously we made the decision, it must be this great idea to fix it. And was it implemented? Yes, it was implemented. So therefore it's fixed, because we're just brilliant. But there's no feedback as to say, has that problem increased or decreased or changed due to our intervention? So so that's just an example of, you can see that all the time. They action things, we must do this, we must do this. But then there's no getting feedback to was the problem addressed. It's just one example of the normal organizational malaise. And there are many. And maybe someday I'll just make a list of them all, so you can just be familiar with them. And different organizations maybe don't all occur there, but they generally do. And what we're observing really is what an organization does when there's a lack of organizational hygiene. It sort of decays and declines and enters into dysfunction. And the organizational malaise really it doesn't get so bad that it's rancid or rotten yet, although it may be, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's it just means it doesn't really work very well. It doesn't make sense. It's not getting outcomes. It's just nonsense going on. So yeah, that's how I observed it. And then these patterns, familiar patterns. So now we understand what it is. Just something that happens when there's poor organizational hygiene. And how do you resolve? How do you clear up the NOM? How do you get rid of it? You apply organizational hygiene. You just start creating accountability, transparency. Well, you have to create transparency first before accountability. Feedback for what they're trying to achieve, what they're supposed to do. Intellectual courage, so we can actually discuss it. Moral courage and integrity. That, are they doing what they're actually saying they're about? Now, it's important to realize that, the vast majority of people in the NOM are just good people, just doing their jobs, going home, doing whatever. But they're looking around and it's so normal that you just think this is how we operate. This is how everything is done, And the thing is, the NOM does not want to be questioned because it's got a lot to hide. It does not want intellectual courage. It does not want people who are, questioning for some greater accountability and so on. And therefore, if you're in that organization and you try and bring those things about, life will get difficult for you. And if you want to progress and have a peaceful life, you just don't do it. So there has to be some external force or some requirement or some unified force in the organization that all the people stand up together and say, we demand that we have organizational hygiene in this order. Would you be a culture of the future. You know, I mean, we can talk about that, relative cultures, that cultures can accept something terrible. If everybody accepts it, they're looking around, so well, everybody's okay with this, so it must be okay. But then cultures evolve and everybody realizes this is terrible, and an absence of organizational hygiene is just a totally unacceptable thing. And I think that'll happen maybe over the next 10, 20 years. But yeah, so now we can observe it, we can understand what it is, we can understand the antidote to the NOM, and it's quite frustrating. You know, you see, you know, another classic in the NOM is calling something feedback when it's not feedback. You know, um, when it's really just information that's very biased because there's an outcome. It's not safe to give. So you know, you're getting certain information and you're sort of skewing it. Like for example, what might I think of? You know, case studies in an organization as if they're representative of how the whole thing works. So the feedback is a really good case study. Now it is representative of a particular individual's journey, which is helpful. You can see good, you know, it is good. But the NOM pretends it's feedback about the whole organization. This is how we operate. Now, it may be feedback about the whole operation, or it may not be feedback about the whole operation. But when you pretend that it is, that's the NOM. It's kind of saying, look, this is how we operate. Every person who goes through the system, this is kind of how we do business. And a case that is actually is chosen by the staff, written by the staff, and then presented by management. I mean, it's not really, there's no way you can consider that feedback regarding how the whole service is operating. You can say this is an interesting story, gives us some interesting information, but it's misrepresented as something that it's not. It doesn't have integrity. It's not really feedback. That's another example of the NOM. And of course, yeah. But rather than breaking it down, I'm just introducing the NOM now. Welcome to the NOM. Now you know what it is. Now the next time you're just frustrated and why things are so silly and things aren't getting done and it's a mess, you realize the NOM is what happens basically organizations when you don't have organizational hygiene. And it's just frustrating and just silly. And when you start applying accountability and transparency to it, you start seeing how absolutely ridiculous and what an absolute mess it is. And you see a whole bunch of people invested in pretending it's not a mess and protecting it and all kinds of funny language. You can break down the language they use is quite amazing to avoid actually giving a clear answer and say, oh, for example, I don't know. It's better to give you an example and to see it actually happening in real time. So Rupert Lowe, truly fantastic statesman, just amazing. He does a fantastic job of challenging the civil service and high level ones to accountability, transparency, feedback, integrity. He has intellectual courage, and they're just running around giving all these really strange answers, saying, oh well, that report is due, or I haven't seen that yet, or I can't speak for that, or just all kinds of everything but actual answers, because the NOM is obviously so high. And he's doing the right thing. He's challenging it. He's saying, okay, well, you're going to be accountable. And he says, there's a project, who's responsible for that project? And so, well, it's really more of a committee and it's here. There's nobody responsible. And in so many ways he challenges them. So I'd just like to finish this by showing this man doing a really beautiful job of, it's not challenging the knob, it's the challenging the NOM, challenging the NOM. So it's actually bringing the antidote to it. He is bringing what needs to be universally applied. So the NOM is just cleared away, just scrubbed away, and you start getting a well-functioning system, whether that's a charity, a government organisation, a police force, the NHS, trusts, and so on. Because the default is the NOM. It'll always go to that, and you have to actively apply and scrub away with organisational hygiene and make sure it's applied. And I think once you're aware of this, it's obvious when it's not being applied. You can just have the quickest look at the systems and say, no, straight away you see it. You see the dynamics of the NOM playing out, and then you know you just need to apply it. And obviously you'll see the outcomes. The outcomes are just terrible and also wasteful, and also sometimes really toxic things happen in the NOM. So it's just, and again, the NOM now is, because organisational hygiene isn't being applied universally, we have a real systemic problem with organisational disease, which the NOM is one aspect of organisational disease. And I think in the future we will apply universally organisational hygiene, and this kind of stuff won't be a systemic problem that we just find everywhere. It'll be just sometimes it will occur and we can respond to it and address it, which is very different. But now it's really just a systemic problem. But hopefully, as we advance in this great enlightenment, that will change. I don't think there's any hope about it. I think it is going to change. Obviously, once people become aware of what the NOM is and how to address it, there'll be no accepting it, and it won't be this systemic problem anymore. But anyway, I'm going to leave you with this wonderful man doing just a fantastic job. And honestly, the way he's doing it's not even hard, because it just hasn't been questioned or challenged in so long, due to such poor political leadership. I think the politicians think they're there to cozy up with the civil servants. They're actually there to challenge them on our behalf, to make them accountable for what they're doing and that they're providing value for money. That's actually the job of the politicians. But they've been cozying up to them for too long. So when Rupert Lowe goes in and you could say challenge them, he's just asking them to be accountable, asking them to be transparent, asking them to have feedback for what they've done, asking them to have intellectual courage to discuss things from first principles. That's all he's doing. But they just don't know where to turn. They're just giving these stock answers, and he's just not taking any of it. So, and it's for example, this is what we should be. If for example, in politics, we should be electing politicians that challenge civil servants for accountability, transparency like this in a genuine fashion, like he's doing. He's a great example of being a great statesman and what we need to see happening. So hopefully enjoy this video. I think it's fascinating. It's almost humorous, but it's also very sad just to see how the concepts of transparency, accountability, genuine feedback, intellectual courage, and integrity they just don't like them. They're not familiar with them. It scares them, how comfortable they are in the NOM. But I also think most people, as I said, they're not bad people. They're good people, wanting to live good lives, the vast majority of them. And it's just a bit scary for them. But I think they actually would be happier, much more fulfilled, much more feeling a sense of purpose, a sense that they're doing a good job, a sense of significance and a sense of meaning and a sense of genuine connection. If we were to get rid of the NOM and they were actually to be, brought to that higher level, I think they'd have much more fulfilling lives as government employees and civil servants and so on. So enjoy.
You don't know your own rule book. Your staff turnover is massive, and very often your staff don't understand the rule book either. Have you got the minutes for those meetings? In my experience of government, Mr. Pocklington, most things are minuted to the nth degree. So did your department not minute those meetings? You actually, I think, bully people using this wretched rule book, which has got more loose ends than a plate full of spaghetti. What data do you hold, basically, on the correlation between foreign nationals and medical malpractice taking place within the NHS? I'll take it you don't know that. Yes, James, I was listening to your introduction. You talked about missing data. What is the definition of missing data? And when you drill down and you see you've got 200 tax manuals totaling 80,000 pages, and the UK tax code is 22,000 pages in 2 volumes, it's hardly surprising. So how many illegal migrants have absconded or gone missing from Home Office accommodation in the past 5 years? I mean, do you know the answer to that?
There is this was something that was looked into by the ICIBI recently, and in due course that report will be published.
This report on the face of it looks good, but I think we're looking at quite a soft target in big businesses. I think most of the tax you're not collecting is not coming from big businesses, it's coming from small businesses, and particularly businesses like Turkish barbers and vape shops that you're doing absolutely nothing about, because probably it's more difficult. And I think the cheap deliverables are much easier to deliver when you're looking at big businesses, where you've weaponized people's financial advisors against them, and they are effectively acting for you, not for the company.
So the timed, so the data for that period from that entity has not been submitted.
How can you claim to be improving productivity when police forces are being loaded with immigration tasks you don't measure, you don't report, and you can't quantify? You often come at me saying that something is, you by your own admission, a grey area, but you're going to raise the tax anyway. And you use your larger covenant effectively. You have the taxpayer behind you, businesses don't. They actually have to make profits and pay taxes. And I think here, this is a very, very interesting chart. And even if you look at the light blue, that's error. Well, that's an error because your rule book's so complicated, in my opinion. So why can't you, on burden on businesses, why can't you simplify your own rule book? It's too complicated. With all this mess, now is not the time to have an uncertain situation. I think you were due to have this report out, was it in September? And you're hoping to have this structure out in January? Is that it was January? I mean, when are we going to see it?
The white paper